lot about his childhood in Mississippi. He was
Mm-hmm.
married at the time frame. And then you moved to Wisconsin.
You're
You
talking
married,
about her dad.
talking about her dad. Then you marry a white woman. You live in some town that nobody's ever heard of. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, at least if you're going to be a black person from the projects or the country, like if you're going to marry a white woman, live in the inner city or live near a
Right.
city. So if
Right.
anything happens, but it's like, are you running from something as a black man? Are you, do you just want to be opposite of what you were raised as? You know?
Do you get that from her dad though? Her dad seems really
So I get that from
genuine.
black men. Well, he probably is genuine because I think that dads love their kids and dads want want a black men, right? Because we can't talk about white men. They don't have as much, not had as much adversity. We're talking about black men want the opposite experience of what they had. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like with a lot of black men, they marry these opposites and go into these worlds. They know they're black, but there's no, like, where's the black? Like, how did you find this small town in Wisconsin? Like, why not move to a bigger city? Like,
Yep.
why the conversation between you and this woman was never, we need to raise our kids in an area where they're going to feel a part of the community.
I won't lie. I get her parents' story confused with Grant's parents confused. Like in my mind,
Okay,
they're
Grant
kind
is
of,
Minnesota.
huh?
Grant is Minnesota. His parents were Detroit.
Yeah,
His parents
yeah,
were Detroit.
yeah. So I get all of those stories confused because to be honest, I don't focus on those. I kind of zone out when it gives a backstory about the parents and how they met and stuff because that's not really the purpose of why I'm analyzing this podcast. So I
So
mean,
I see
analyzing
that
this docu-series. So yeah.
right. So I see that in terms of that, but I think as a woman, we look at the whole picture.
Right,
Where what are the like when? So I'm a black girl, right?
right, right.
Raised with parents who are from the South, but my mom grew up in the North.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom is also very good with not only code switching, but code switching between black and white. So I've seen it all. And I'm always, like, we'll talk about it later, but like with the science teacher, I'm always interested in people who talk about race from the mixed point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, like, what was the parents' background? Like, did you talk to them about race or did you just immerse them? Like when you listen to her mom and she's like, I want people to see as people. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost the same as people saying, I don't see color. To me, that's so I look
Yeah.
at the parents, just like as teachers, we look at a parent's background. If you
Right.
got a child that talks back to you, you already, when you meet the parent, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
What was it? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yeah.
and she said it in a nicer way, people is people. I think people wouldn't be as opposed if people didn't say color, see color is color. Don't see color or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's deep.
So that's all.
That's
And
deep. Yeah.
And I applaud the dad because it sounds like he talks to his kids about race, which is why you said you don't get that from the dad. He talks to his kids about race, so it's almost
Wait,
like
what dad are we talking about? Are we talking about Miss Stovall's?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I watched this episode maybe 3 times. I literally zoomed past that. Like I just zone out. I don't touch the remote. I just zone out because I'm like, I just want to focus on the kids. Like
Okay.
Miss Stovall is super important and she's super important to the story and to the school and to this community, but I kind of don't care about her parents' background. Just as what I do. Right. I care, but you know, for what I'm trying to accomplish on the podcast. But no, you brought up very interesting points. And when her mom did say that she, what was the phrase? She wished that
I want people to see
people as people. Mm-hmm. I thought about that today. How would society be if everyone just saw people as people? And then it's funny you said what you said about she wants everyone to be colorblind. Because I thought about that too. And I was like, as I'm driving down the interstate, I'm actually thinking about the exact same things. So
but
it's
you
true.
Didn't say those words.
Right. But I thought that in my head as a black man, what would I be without my Afrocentrism? What would I be if I wasn't a part of the African diaspora? Because it defines me. Like there's a reason why I named this the Black Scholars Podcast. The company, Black Scholars Publishing. Now I got the clothing, Black Scholars Clothing. Like I have black in everything on purpose because that's part of my purpose. So if I didn't have a group of people I identified with, I don't know if I would be doing what I feel like is God's work, is the
Right.
destiny that God had for me, which is interesting because I guess then if everyone was colorblind, everybody would be my people.
Right.
I don't know. I
Right.
don't know. I don't know. That's tough as a Black man to deal with, to even think about. But I was thinking about it earlier. So
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up. Great minds think alike.
Mm-hmm.
So let's keep all that. Let's keep going. That's good. So this is episode 38. Welcome back, guys, to the Black Scholars Podcast. It's me, Leonard Andre Wilson Jr., your host, and Dr. Foster is back. Welcome back, ma'am. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? Enjoying my July. It's my birthday month.
Happy, when is your birthday exactly?
July 20th.
Okay, I'm gonna have to write that down somewhere.
Yeah, so summertime baby. We never could celebrate our birthday in K-12 growing up, and now as a teacher, I'm never on a job where I'm celebrating my birthday. So when you have a birthday in the summer, you're just used to celebrating it with friends and family.
That's the way it should be. I'm one of those weird educators where I prefer for kids not to know my birthday. I'm for real, personally, because but I guess I'm kind of private like that, where I'm just like, I don't want kids to know about my life, like mind your business. But I mean, I give them a little bit because you got to connect to them, so they need to know a little bit. But I just want them to know a little bit. I don't want them Googling me. I don't want them YouTubing me, and they do it all the time. Yeah, they do it all the time. So I'm like, you kids are so nosy, so nosy. All right, let's get into it. So, continuing with that fact of what we were just talking about. And so this is great because on episode 37, I had to stop myself from discussing the very end of episode 3. If you remember how episode 3 ended with what's his name? Mr. God, I can't pronounce his name.
Mr. Physics teacher?
Yeah, it's the physics teacher. What is his name? Mr.
I thought it was a P.
It's something with a P. I had it written down somewhere, but I still can't pronounce it. Is it Perdoli? Something like that.
Maybe.
Let's just call him Mr. P because I'm going to butcher his name. Mr. P.
Sounds great.
And he's a physics teacher too, so that works. Right. So with Mr. P, who is a part of the racial equity learning strand. He's a part of that. And actually, he's more on the extended side. And feel free to jump in. But it's a little confusing on the documentary because they talk about the learning strand in Mrs. Stovall's class with one other white male teacher at the school. And he kind of is the head of it, right? And then also in episode 3, it shows us a meeting. And that meeting was fabulous. And I broke that down already about where the superintendent was there, the principal was there, the parents were there, very powerful quotes there, and realizations about the lack of sense of urgency at Oak Park River Forest High. And so fast forward past all of that. Okay, so then at the very end, we have Mr. P sitting there with Charles, one of our favorites. He's the comedian. He's the spoken word artist, the poet, the rapper. He's very funny, and he lives in a single parent household. They kind of described that, I believe, in episode 1 or 2, and we got a chance to see how tight the bond is between him and his mom. So. Right. Mr. P sitting there with Charles, and he's sitting there with Jada. I love Jada. I've had students like Jada. I would probably make an argument that when I was in high school, I probably was like a male version of Jada because I challenged everything. And if I felt like something wasn't funny, whether it came from an adult.
Was that in episode 3 or 4?
Was what?
Okay, the meeting between Mr. P, Charles, and Jada.
Maybe it wasn't 4, but you know how 3 ended? 3 ended
where they were in class.
They were in class. That's right. Thank you for correcting me on that. Okay.
And they got the assignment.
What was the assignment?
It was some type of essay. And then episode 4 is when they were all talking about like the essay.
I think in episode 4, I don't know. Anywho, how three ends,
Mm-hmm.
how three ends, and this is the part I didn't address on the previous podcast episode, and I wanted to save it for this, and I'm glad that I did, is we have Mr. P, who is a white Anglo-Saxon Caucasian male high school physics teacher. Okay. For any adult, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your background, your ethnicity, your native language, your culture, you've got to connect with a diverse group of kids. Okay. You already have an age barrier. So you have to find a way to relate to them. You want them to not necessarily like you, but you do want them to enjoy being in class. And you want to find a way to keep them engaged and to try to increase, I'll say, their intrinsic motivation, even
Right.
though most high school kids are not intrinsically motivated.
Right.
They're really extrinsically motivated, which for the most part is grades and whatever rewards they feel they get or should get for having positive grades, whether that's their parents buying them things they want to, trips, vacations. I mean, let's keep in mind again, Oak Park, River Forest is a affluent, wealthy community and district. They're doing well for themselves. So that's not out of the norm if kids expect some type of rewards for doing well. Okay. Um, but we see Jada and Charles in this. Is it an AP course, Dr. Foster? Is that an AP physics class or just a physics class?
It could be just physics, but to take physics, you had to have taken biology, chemistry, and earth science.
Right, right, of course. So, because I do know Jada is in other AP courses.
Mm-hmm.
I know she has honors courses. So maybe this isn't, but it's a physics class. And if anybody's taking physics in high school, unless you really, really love science and you really have a gift for science, you probably had some struggles with it. And I'm thinking back to my experience in high school with physics. And yeah, I had some trouble. I wasn't very
I've never
focused on that
taken
class.
physics.
Oh my, it's entertaining to say the least. It's an entertaining class. And so Jada, and we don't know Jada's full story yet as far as her parents. We got a chance in episode 4 to see mom, and mom is very involved, right?
Right. But I think for sake of the episodes and probably the series, we don't really need to see Jada's background right now. We need to see Jada, as probably the student that comes full,
Right.
but brings like this perspective of not here to play.
Let me tell you why I want to know. Because one, they're giving us everybody else's background, right? So I'm like, give me Jada's. Like,
Right,
because
right.
Jada is fair skinned, she's light skinned. So and to me, it really doesn't matter if her dad is white or if her dad is black. She could just have a regular black dad. Like, he might not be white, but she's really light skinned. Her mom is really light skinned. It doesn't really make a difference to me, but it is interesting how the filmmakers choose whose story to go deeper into. So maybe we'll get that in future episodes. I hope with Jada, because she's a very interesting scholar and just a human being personally. And her personality, like, she has a fabulous personality, but like you said, she's not here for play. She's very focused. She's diligent. She's opinionated, and she's not apprehensive about sharing how she feels. And we see that open up between episode 3 and 4. So here's the part about 3 that I really wanted to talk about in last episode that I didn't, and we're going to get into on this one, is, and this is going to open up a whole nother can of worms, but let me try to compartmentalize that in my brain right now. Let's just focus on race. Mr. P, he's a white guy. He's teaching high school. He's trying to be as relatable as possible, but he's saying some jokes, and he's trying to make the race issue, he's trying to make it more lighthearted. He's trying to bring down whatever tension might potentially be there. And at the same time, he's pissing Jada off. Charles is fine. Charles is laughing with him. Charles is a goofball. He's a comedian. He's fine. But Jada's not here for it. And The part that hurt me as a father, as an educator, as a black man, especially in times like this, when she said she doesn't feel comfortable in that class at times and it's affecting her learning, and at times she just wants to leave the class in the middle of class. Oh my. Like
Right.
seriously, I had to grab my Roku remote, which I can rarely find. I had to hit pause and just sit there and think for a second. Because to me, that was a red flag. If a student says their learning is being affected, impacted by what the classroom instructional leader, is doing in class, time out, red flag. Whoa, what did I do? Let me figure this out. And then that's going to lead us to another discussion about Mr. P. But what were
Right.
your thoughts on that
So,
on episode 3 about what she said?
okay. So my thoughts on that, and again, just maybe I'm getting the conversation between 3 and 4 mixed up, but basically it's all the same conversation.
Yes.
One thing Jada says is that she really doesn't find the racial jokes funny or anything like it funny, as well as she uses the word shuck and jive. And in Black
Mm-hmm.
households, we learn that. My parents have taught me that don't let people shuck and jive with you. Look at those Black people who are shuckers and jivers. I'm not an English teacher, but do you call these colloquialisms or things that we just say in the African American household?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I will say this, the conversation that Mr. P and the English teacher had together that night at the dinner table, it was a really good conversation, right? Between a Black
Ooh.
person and a white person. And they both made valid points. And I think that Mr. P is coming from an area of, he is comfortable around Black people, right? I'm going to give that to him. He's comfortable enough to have race conversations with Black people and think that he can go and be the leader that leads that with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also Jada makes a good point. Who are the kids on the panel? Like, Jada's deep. You all are implementing these racial get along, you're trying to know me, but who are the kids on the panel? And I'm telling you, it doesn't make me feel comfortable. But then Mr. P's response is, well, Charles seems fine with it, and we're getting it from the people above, so you feel comfortable. And so in that moment right there, it's when I also noted this right here is a further conversation that needs to happen by itself. Because what this is it's your cycle of research. They are trying to implement with this racial equity literacy strand they're doing in the classroom, and now they need to see what's working and what's not. And just like you do in research when you're writing qualitative dissertation, you need information needs to be gathered from all parties. And we can gather Charles and we can gather Mr. P, but if you don't bring what Jada says to the table, what you're doing is not valid.
Right.
Because I see Charles's point, but see, Charles is also, again, he's a lighthearted person, right? And so I would also ask, as a Black female, I have observed, I don't know if I've been in that position before, but I have observed Black men and Black women who will laugh with the joke, whereas I'm the person sometimes, I'm not laughing with the joke, I'm Jada. I'm like, we're here for physics, we're here for, don't laugh and joke with me about my hair when I'm here for academics. You need to find another strand of racial sincerity to talk to me about.
Or not.
Mm-hmm.
Or not. Like, Jada is a serious enough, astute enough scholar where our connection could be strictly academic. Like, you can make connections within the curriculum, within the lessons, within the projects. That should be the connection he has with her. And I wasn't counting, but looking at that physics class, how many Black kids did you see altogether, including Jada and Charles? Was it like 3 or 4?
Yeah, there's one that sits next to Jada.
Yep.
And she kind of smiles, but she keeps her head down.
Right.
And I didn't count anymore. But another thing I want to say too, just like how we know that all white people are not the same, white people have to know that all Black students are not the same and they don't all come from the same background.
We are not. We are vastly diverse.
Mm-hmm.
This
And
is a,
so,
go ahead.
well, and so you have kids, and you could show up and they had 20 kids in front of them, all grandma, and then now your kids come in and you have mom and dad.
Right.
And that conversation has to now go totally different than when you were shucking and jiving with grandma.
All right. So, Lord
And
have
so
mercy.
what they have to what that teacher needs to realize is, like you just said, or not, he can align with her in academics. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is where more conversation has to be had, in terms of you've gotten him to engage, but Jada is already engaged. So how can you keep her engaged on a different level?
So, Lord, I apologize, listeners. This is gonna, no matter how I edit this is gonna sound very discombobulated, but then it's gonna all come together, and everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, okay, I get it, I see it." Um, it's so many different conversations to have just about. So I know a Mr. P. Okay, doesn't go by the name Mr. P. I've worked with several Mr. P's. And they give us the backstory of Mr. P. His dad or granddad was heavily involved in the different world wars and the Civil War, and he was on the Union side, if you will. Okay, dad or granddad was an abolitionist, and Mr. P was instilled in him about equality and diversity and racial sensitivity, and he grew up in Oak Park. And as I said on episode 1, go back to the 60s, go back to the 70s. Oak Park, Illinois has been a community of open arms where they've embraced African Americans. They try to avoid the white flight, and the young white liberals stayed. But to the point that Glenn Singleton said on episode 3, we see with white liberals, their activism, their participation against racism and discrimination, it only goes but so far until it gets to the point where it's interfering with how they see things and how they live life. Because whether you're the most liberal white American to ever have existed, you still have this little thing in your pocket called white privilege. And you can't get rid of it. You can reject it, but you're still going to benefit from it no matter what. So Mr. P has studied. It's a part of his family. He's done the research. He's written about it. He actually hands Jada and Charles a a memoir that he's written on race and gives it to them for them to read. And at the end of episode 4, we see Jada being as honest, opinionated, and candid as she can possibly be about just what you said, Dr. Foster. Like, look, race is not a joke to me. And actually, that's the title of the show. There's nothing funny about race.
Nothing funny about it. There's nothing funny. My dad has always taught me that the quote she left out with was, "When you guys talk about race and class, you're not taking it seriously."
Mm-hmm. And so then Jada and Charles, 2 African American kids, similar upbringings as far as what we know thus far on the docu-series, and they're at odds with each other because, again, Charles, lovable, loves to laugh, make people laugh. He's a comedian. He wants to make light of the situation. And it's much to the point that I said earlier when I'm driving down the interstate and I'm thinking about what Mrs. Stovall's mom said. Was that Mrs. Stovall? That was Mrs. Stovall's mom that said that, right? That what if people just saw people as people? Whatever that phrase was. And so again, I understand Jada's point, and I am a male version of Jada. And I saw Charles' point, and I am an older version of Charles. I see both. And I guess I'm trying to figure out who's not necessarily who's right or who's wrong, but can it be both at
So,
times?
so I think they're kids, and so there is no right or wrong
Right.
because we're all continuing through life having internal conversations about race as well as
Mm-hmm.
having external conversations about race. And so, like, I've talked with a lot of my colleagues. At this point in time in my life, I'm at the point in race where I don't want to go to another workshop where we go from slavery to Jim Crow to now. If
Right.
you have read about the history before we get to a workshop,
Right.
you are holding us back. And
Right.
that's what I tell my friends about race. You are holding yourself back and people are holding you back if you need them to explain the last 300 years to you before we get started.
Right.
300 years is going to take you 40 minutes and then you have 15 minutes to talk about where we're going next.
Right.
So I think that Jada is valid and of course Charles is valid, but I would like Charles to speak more because I was mad as a
He
teacher.
shut down. He shut down.
He shut down. And I don't know, is that a male
Why?
thing? I'm not going to say African American male, but I don't know if that's a male thing because males generally like to keep peace and they don't like any spats back and forth. And I honestly, the teacher held his side, but Jada held his side. And I didn't see that ending. I didn't see that ending even with the kids coming in class. And so I think that with Charles, there's something else that Charles is thinking that he just is not going to verbalize in that kind of setting.
And also remember episode 4, there's a situation going on with his dad that
He
he's
feeling.
dealing with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a lot of other things on his mind as well, too, with his own relationship with his father, that if I were in his predicament at that time, I wouldn't want to get into a debate with Jada about that either. I understood why he shut down.
And I just thought of something right now. I don't know if what I say is right or wrong, because I've actually had a Black male in his 40s tell me 2 weeks ago when I talked to him about race, he said, "Look at you with your privilege." And my response back to him, because I'm very analytical, is if I can pick up and read a book and you think that's privilege, then I don't know where you're coming from. Because if you think reading is privilege, then you need to reteach yourself. But one thing I just thought about is, like you said, he had other stuff going on in his life.
Mm-hmm.
It is, first of all, a privilege in Mr. P's eyes for white people to sit down and just talk about race and not do. But it's also a privilege, when you think about it, for Black people to just sit down and talk about race without having, because to sit down and talk about race, but not sit down and talk about you going through the juvenile justice system, what's going on with your parents, you're not having to think about money and other things that are going on in your life. Those are other factors. But for us to just sit down and just talk about race and not have to talk about these other factors that could be affecting us personally,
Mm-hmm.
that's a privilege within itself. And at that point in time, Charles did not have the capacity to talk about that because he had other things going on in his life. Jada may not have nothing adverse going on in her life right now, so all she does is have time to focus on physics and race and how you're going to address me with race. But what I see is not the right way to be addressed, and I'm going to address you back.
Right.
That's a privilege within itself if we think about it as somebody Black, to be able to address somebody back. You call somebody boy and you say, no, sir, I'm a sir. So when you
Mm-hmm.
call me sir, then we can have a conversation. That's a privilege within itself.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I also think, and hopefully I'm not just reiterating what you're saying, but to piggyback on that, don't you think what Charles did is Black privilege as well? Well, let me not even call it Black privilege. Let me call it Black middle class privilege. For him not to participate in the debate, and I mean, anyone could just not, refuse to participate. But besides the issues that's going on with Dad, everything you just said, you know what it made me think about? It made me think about their mothers. Again, back to, I believe it was episode 1 or 2, we have the opportunity to meet Charles' mother, okay? And we see them working out together and they have a great relationship. Dad's not really in the picture. Mom mentioned that she planned on either going to law school or med school, and she had Charles early. She had him at a really young age, which might be the reason why they have such a closer relationship than, I guess, a traditional black mom and son. But now she's in IT. So I remember my notes for episode 1 or 2, whenever that was, and I said financially well off. Now, I mean, I don't know what position she actually does in IT, but IT, as we all know, is a vastly growing, developing field, and it's going to continue to be that way for the foreseeable future. Um, so, and we see them moving. She's doing well. Charles is doing well, despite the fact that he doesn't have his dad there financially. He doesn't have to worry about the same things that other kids have to worry about. To our point, when we talked about what Kendall has said in his creative writing class, he feels a burden, and that was in episode 3. He feels a burden or a guilt that he's not in the same situation that other African American kids in Chicago may be in, simply because his aunt and his uncle were there to pick up where his mother and father could not. So I do think the socioeconomic part it plays a huge factor in who Charles is, and the fact that he just wants to do things that make him happy. He wants to focus on getting into a great college, getting a great career. And if you go back to episode 1 and those one-on-one interviews with Charles' mother, she explicitly said she didn't want Charles growing up like the other black kids that he was seeing in the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that both they're in my mind, is there a right or wrong way to tackle racism and to talk about it? And I think the two of them being high school students, that was both of their ways. Jada could be a head-on person, right? I'm gonna meet you head on and meet you in the hallway. That's me. But
Right.
Charles is like, nah, it's okay. It's cool. Yeah, just not right now. All right. When there's a bigger situation, we'll get to it. Not right now. And that could be Charles's way.
And I think we see that, just stepping away from the documentary for a sec, we see that in real life right now. We have some people, especially specifically social media, you see a comment from someone racist or someone practicing bigotry. And you have those African Americans who are going to address it directly.
Right.
And some are going to take it even to another step. They're going to take it farther. And they're going to contact their buddy in IT, and they're going to give such and such his username, and they're going to scroll through their pictures and their social media, and they're going to scrub through the internet, and they're going to find out where that person works. And then they're going to take screenshots and send it to that person's corporation. That's why you got a lot of people, a lot of Karens getting fired right now for things that they're doing on social media and offline as well that makes its way to social media. And then you have other people like Charles who, and I'm speaking from an honest perspective when I say this, sometimes you just get tired.
Yes.
Especially right now. You get tired. It's so much going on. We got, the whole NASCAR Bubba Wallace thing. We got George Floyd. We got Breonna Taylor. I mean, there's so many names with everything that was happening in Ferguson. Everything that happened in Ferguson. And then they had the Black Lives Matter students of color only assembly. And then all of the white parents and families went crazy and contacted the central office and the superintendent, and it made the news, and it spread. It went viral. So this thing is embedded in race. And so for that point, sometimes you just get tired. Like, you know what? We could do this. I could block you. I could find out where you work. I could. Sometimes you just like, you know what? Just leave me alone. Like, I can't mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, like dealing with racism and oppression and all this other stuff on a consistent basis is draining. It's tiring. I'm not saying that means give up and don't do anything about it, but you still have to practice self-care as an African American or a minority in this country. You just have to protect yourself at times.
Right. No, it doesn't mean give up. But like I've talked to some people, and I think it's interesting people call me, they want my views on education and racism. I tell them at the very beginning of the conversation, I said, now, can you handle my view? You're going to be mad. What I tell them the bottom line is, and something my dad has always taught me, stay focused on the money, stay focused on the economics. This is what I always tell people. You know, you listen to rap music and they're always talking about money, money, money. But it's true. Stay focused on the money and stay focused on the economics. Because they say, follow the money, and where's the money leading to?
Right.
And I definitely agree with all the people in terms of symbolism. We have the, statues, we're painting everywhere. But let's follow the money. Let's follow that up with everybody that showed up for a Black Lives Matter painting on the street. Let's also show up at the next city council, and where's the budget at?
Exactly.
The budget should be made public. It should be, learn the rules. The budget should be made public how many days in advance of a meeting, so that you have time to do it. Now, how many days in advance do I need to be able to speak for my 3 minutes at the city council meeting?
Right.
How many days in advance? Who votes? Just like when you watch C-SPAN and you see who's voting for what bills in Senate and Congress.
Yep.
Who's voting to where the money goes? Do you live in that person's district? Right. Or is it an at-large? Is it an at-large board? That's where the focus goes next. And so, yes, you can get inundated. You forget the names. I never want to forget names. I'm never going to forget Emmett Till. I'm never going to forget these people's names, African Americans' names. But we have to focus on the economics of money, because that's what it boils down to.
That's what this country is founded on: capitalism. And
that's what's not taught, and that's where people miss the mark. Right?
Yep.
And we can be mad all day long at police shootings, but we have, is it called qualified immunity? Police are doing what they can do. So you have to change the law.
Yep.
And so that's what people have to focus on. And so, I don't know. I say that to say, you're right. You're right. Yeah. The kids are right.
They are. Both of them. They're right. Yep.
They're discussing it as best as they know how. Because if you were to ask me, when did I first discuss race?
Yep.
African American history is different than discussing racism.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know when I first started talking about racism, because I'll be honest with you, when I first started teaching in Memphis and Mississippi, I taught in an all-Black environment. I never faced racism on the job. I never faced it until I moved back home to Maryland. Liberal state. But that's another podcast topic.
Yeah, and as far as teaching is concerned, of course, I started out as a special education teacher and crossed over to regular ed. I always discuss racism with my students. And even when I was in Millington, that's still predominantly white. It's a different type of white. They're not as affluent as the district I'm in now, but white kids, Black kids, Asian kids, Hispanic kids, it doesn't matter who my demographic in front of me is. I always talk about race, because for me, I can teach, and I say this all the time, I can literally teach the academic standards with my eyes closed. The thing that makes it jump out and kids be able to take those skills and progress and show growth and reach achievement, which is definitely the issue of Oak Park River Forest and schools like it across this country, is this achievement gap, which leads to a socioeconomic gap, a widening wealth gap. It starts with life lessons. That's what I get excited about teaching. So I don't want George Floyd type situations happening, but when they do happen, I get in that classroom with highly complex text and we break it down. And we have a discussion, and we continue to refer to it throughout the year. So by the time they leave my class, they don't realize all of the technical skills I've been teaching them. They remember those stories.
Right.
But the skills come with it. So it's kind of like, you remember what did Tupac say before? He said something about when making music, like you have to put the medicine like in something sweet, right? Like in the Jell-O, in the pudding, whatever it is. Like,
okay.
They don't get it. They don't get it. If you just try to give it to them dry, they won't get it. But if you put a story behind it that's authentic and means something outside of, just showing mastery on the standard or doing well on the standardized test, the kids will get it.
Right.
That's the trick. That's the trick. So definitely.
I don't know who you want to talk about next, but I definitely want to talk about Mr. Byers, Michael Byers, the behavior specialist.
I did have him on my list, but let's finish out Jada really, really quick. So, in finishing out Jada, more so the teacher, Mr. P, the physics teacher, and I'm saying that I've worked with this educator before. I've worked with this type of instructor before. Just because, and you kind of said this already, just because you've done the reading, the studying, you've done a thesis on it, you've written a dissertation on it, unless you are actually it, and that it is African American, Black in America, you can't relate. You're doing your best. You're doing more than most. We appreciate that. But you can't relate. And you also can't take those theories that you have formed and molded over the years through your reading and teaching and different students you deal with and try to apply them to everyone. It doesn't work that way. Like we said, Charles, you can joke with Charles about race. Okay? Not everyone is Charles.
Right.
Jada's not Charles, clearly. So for teachers who are like that and are listening to this podcast, please stop. Please stop. Because, I've studied the indigenous people, Native Americans since I was young, especially being from Wisconsin, since I was young. And that's actually a part of my heritage, like a small percentage, but it's a part of my heritage. If I ever have a Native American student in my classroom, do you think I'm going to joke to them about race?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't even try to approach that or anything that I've learned about their culture and everything that happened to them. I'm not going to apply it as a theory and just assume that it's going to work and trying to relate to them. You've got to focus on the actual kids. That's why I said it's so important to get to know your kids. Like, you truly have to take time to build relationships and build rapport with your students. And I hate this phrase, me and Dr. Foster, listeners, by the way, we have an ongoing list of words that we want to be retired.
Yeah.
That we never want to see again, that we see all over social media and in the news. And here's another phrase for us: read the room. But it's true. I need my Anglo-Saxon brothers and sisters in this thing we call education, in this profession, to read the room. If you make a joke that's not racist, but it deals with race, and some of the reaction is not so receptive, and you can tell just by reading body language if a kid can relate to what you just said or if you just made them uncomfortable. And here we have Jada telling him directly, like, you're making me feel uncomfortable. Like, when he picked up her coffee cup, I felt her. I was like, yo, don't touch my coffee cup.
Right. That's one thing that you have to be careful of. You can't touch kids' stuff.
Yeah,
Because
don't touch my stuff.
Will, just like with touching hair. I have
exactly. Yo, let's call, really quick, and I'm not to bash on Mr. P, but there were a couple of things that he said. So the coffee cup thing, and he was asking, I didn't know you were OCD or whatever like that. Okay, that could be offensive if she really was OCD, because that's an actual diagnosis. He said something when he was talking to Miss Stovall, and they were not at school. I don't know whose house they were at, maybe his. But he said something about, I know about weave. Did you catch that?
Yeah, that was that one-on-one conversation there.
Yeah. He was like, I know about weave, so I can. I'm like, huh?
But you could see it in her eyes. Her reaction was, weave is not the end-all be-all to get to know Black students.
Yeah, and not all Black girls wear weave.
I didn't wear one until senior prom.
And also, it's wrong to associate weave with Black women, Black girls, period, because regardless of race or ethnicity, I see everyone. Who's not doing natural wearing weave.
First of all, as a professional.
Yeah.
So as a professional female, maybe one-on-one I can talk to an African-American female about weave, but never will I say it out loud in the classroom. But if I were to take it from a female standpoint, talking about males, Black boys brush their hair a lot for the waves,
They do.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I can be a jokester with my students sometime, but I also have real lame jokes. The most I've ever said to students is, how many times you're going to brush? The waves have waved out.
Right.
That's the most I'm
Right.
going to say. But
Right.
also you have to realize, what is the psychology of why African American males are brushing their hair to get waves? They're not getting conks anymore, like what Malcolm X got when he was singing when the police came and he put his hair in the water.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of waving out the naps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's a more attractive form of hair. Yeah.
As Eurocentric thinking wants us to think that. And so to talk about that out loud, it's making light of what they could be conscious of.
Exactly.
Okay. Girls wear weaves for a reason.
Right.
Because they think that I'm supposed to have long hair, or I can't wear my hair in cornrows if I have no perm. So I must cover it up. And so talking about these things sometimes opens up other doors, like how Jada said, I don't feel comfortable. It opens up other doors that you should not put kids in a predicament in the classroom.
Go to blackscholarspublishing.com.
You just gotta go.